all the elements of head to toe dress. So heaps and heaps of earrings in various designs. Here you see many examples, different types of beads, also gold necklaces and some pendants. Anklets and bracelets always occurring in pairs and sometimes very heavy. The heaviest anklets were about 3.5 pounds each. So heavy, you could still walk with 3.5 pound weights on your ankles, but you would be very aware of the presence of that wealth on your body. And rings coming in sets of 10. So you're going to wear them on every finger of both hands in these matching sets. And of course, headdresses of a variety of types, from cap-like crowns to diadems. And there were some other very kind of thin, fine woven wires of gold that could be worn around the head as well. And these are the intact headdresses. There were also several components of this diadem type that you see here found kind of broken. They probably would have had leather or cloth attachments, and that's why we only have some of the pieces left, but lots and lots of adornment. So I started to think, of course, how is it worn on the body? So I had to go look in the publication, and I started putting the items of adornment in the coffins where the find spots were listed. But in most of the tombs, they didn't explain where the objects were found. They just listed the numbers. So I would look up, say, 1989.195, go to the index, go to the illustrations and find, oh, cool, it's a mirror, and put it there. So what I started building out turned out to be head to toe dress, going down to the anklets at the bottom and the headdress at one end of the sarcophagus. Sometimes you're finding earrings or bracelets on either side of the coffin as well. So we know these women were buried wearing their adornment in addition to having heaps of it included in their coffins. In addition to that, there is evidence that they were clothed. They were not in there naked, covered in jewelry. They were wearing garments. And that's the story of my shower curtain, because this is all that survives. These little tufts of fabric and bits of fabric, it's all linen. One tested as cotton, but everything else tested as linen. There are even some tassels that survive intact, but we don't have a full garment. We don't have a full piece of cloth. So to try to figure out how the women were dressed, we have to turn to art. In addition to these bits of fabric, though, that are highly deteriorated, there were pounds, kilos of gold elements. They're very thin with either holes in them or loops on the back, like buttons that would have been sewn onto garments. And this might be some trim, these gold ribbons that would have gone along the edges of garments. So thinking about how we would dress the queen, this is a close-up image of the queen from that first sculpture that I showed you that had the king and queen dining together. If you look closely, you can see how the garment is wrapped and draped with fringes and tassels on it and decorations. So we imagine that might be gold foils like we saw coming from the tomb. I worked with, at the time I was teaching at FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology, where they had courses in draping. So I worked with the students in the advanced draping course. I was so lucky to have that opportunity to try to wrap fabric to reconstruct what the garment might have looked like. It proved to be impossible to match what we see in art. At least we did not crack the code, but this was our final outcome. It really doesn't quite match. Looking at some other garments in art, we see some examples that are simpler with just short sleeves and a sort of belted tunic. So for the reconstruction that I ultimately produced that you see here, I can show it to you larger here. We went with a very simple kind of sheath dress, adding the gold foils to it. This is just an interpretation. It's for the sake of clothing the queen. We don't know exactly how the fabric would have been layered or draped or the position of these gold decorations, but you can imagine she would have glittered. You're walking through a palace in torchlight. You're walking into one of those courtyards bathed in sunlight. You would be reflecting light covered in gold like this. And then to scale on a model, as you see here, she's modeled to be about 5'1". We produced the jewelry to scale and put it on her body. So hopefully it's a very kind of naturalistic example of how the queen would have been dressed.